Hello, everyone. It's been way too long since we last got together for our bedtime stories. I hope you're all doing well and that you've had good nights with my previous tales. First of all, thank you so much for all your comments and shares. It really makes me happy to see that our stories accompany you in your moments of relaxation. By the way, don't hesitate to react under this video. Tell me which part struck you the most, and if you have suggestions for mysterious stories you'd like me to tell. Your feedback is precious and helps me enormously to improve the content. Little news: I've also started publishing shorts with short, mysterious stories for those who want to quickly discover fascinating tales. You'll find them on the channel if you're interested. Now, make yourselves comfortable. Adjust your pillow, dim the lights, and let your mind prepare for an extraordinary journey through time. Breathe deeply and let all your worries evaporate. Tonight, I'm taking you into one of the most troubling enigmas in the history of Spanish conquest. A story so extraordinary that it seems straight out of a fantasy novel, and yet documented by dozens of official witnesses, recorded in the most serious chronicles of the time, then mysteriously erased from history books. Imagine men so tall that a Spanish conquistador wouldn't reach their knees. Human creatures nearly 4 meters tall, with bones so enormous that the most seasoned explorers trembled upon discovering them. Teeth the size of a hand, ribs as long as swords, skulls that defy everything science knows about human anatomy. This story begins in 1520 with Magellan, continues with stunning archaeological discoveries in Peru, and ends with a disappearance as mysterious as it is troubling. For all these gigantic bones, studied and documented for centuries, eventually evaporated without a trace. What do the Spanish chronicles really hide? Why does official history refuse to mention these extraordinary discoveries? And above all, what became of these physical proofs that so many witnesses saw and described with precision? Tonight, let yourself be carried away by this fascinating investigation into the lost giants of the Americas. A story where reality surpasses fiction, where each testimony raises more questions than it provides answers. Close your eyes, relax, and prepare to discover one of humanity's best hidden mysteries. Our story begins in 1520, in the icy waters of the South Atlantic. Ferdinand Magellan, the Portuguese explorer in service of Spain, sails toward the unknown during his attempted circumnavigation of the world. His expedition makes a stop in a bay they would name Puerto San Julian, on the eastern coast of what would later become Argentina. What Magellan and his men discover on this isolated beach would forever mark the history of exploration. Antonio Pigafetta, the Venetian chronicler accompanying the expedition, meticulously records what he observes. His writings, preserved in historical archives, describe an encounter that defies imagination. On the beach stands a naked man, dancing and singing. But this man is not ordinary, Pigafetta notes with stupefaction. This man was so tall that our heads barely reached his waist, and his voice resembled that of a bull. The Spanish sailors, though accustomed to the marvels of the New World, remain speechless. One of them receives Magellan's order to imitate the natives' dance to show their peaceful intentions. This strategy works, and soon other members of this extraordinary tribe appear on the beach. Antonio de Herrera y Tordesillas, the Spanish historian who would later compile these testimonies, specifies that the smallest of these men was taller and more robust than the most imposing of Magellan's men. The conquistadors name the first giant Paul and attempt to establish dialogue. Pigafetta describes with fascination these beings' appearance. His face was wide and painted entirely in red, except around the eyes where there were yellow circles. These giants wear animal skins and seem perfectly adapted to the region's harsh climate. But what strikes the Spanish most is their truly extraordinary height, more than 9 feet for some, nearly 3 meters. Magellan, conscious of his discovery's importance, decides to bring 2 living specimens back to Spain as proof of this mysterious race's existence. He uses cunning, luring two giants aboard his ships with shiny objects: mirrors, scissors, little bells. Pigafetta recounts how the giants find the shackles placed on their ankles amusing, not understanding the trap closing on them. Unfortunately for science, the two giants won't survive the return voyage to Europe. They die at sea, taking with them the living proof of their extraordinary existence. But Magellan nevertheless leaves a lasting legacy for posterity. He names this land Patagonia, meaning land of big feet in Portuguese, in reference to the gigantic footprints left by these men in the sand. This episode from Magellan's expedition is only the first in a long series of convergent testimonies. In the decades that follow, other Spanish explorers report similar encounters along South American coasts. Amerigo Vespucci himself, during a 1499 expedition along Venezuelan coasts, describes men taller than Germans, with feet twice larger than normal. These repeated testimonies begin to draw a troubling pattern. Everywhere the Spanish land on South American coasts, they seem to encounter traces or representatives of this giant race. Francisco López de Gomara, official chronicler of Charles V, compiles these reports and notes that descriptions concordantly troubling. Everywhere, the same extraordinary heights, the same impossible proportions, the same testimonies from experienced sailors little inclined to exaggeration. But it's with the exploration of the continent's interior that these mysterious encounters will take on an even more extraordinary dimension. For the Spanish will no longer only encounter living giants, they will discover the fossilized remains of an entire civilization of these extraordinary beings. The year 1543 marks a decisive turning point in this extraordinary story. Juan de Olmos, lieutenant governor of Puerto Viejo, in the Guayaquil region of Ecuador, receives from local natives a tale that would upset his worldview. The natives tell him an ancient legend. In a nearby valley, giants who came from the sea once lived, before being destroyed by divine fire for their sins. But more troubling still, they assert that these creatures' bones still rest in this cursed valley. Olmos, a pragmatic and curious man, decides to organize an expedition to verify these claims. What he discovers surpasses everything he could have imagined. In his official reports, preserved in Spanish colonial archives, he writes, "We found ribs and other bones so large that, if skulls hadn't appeared at the same time, it wouldn't have been credible that they belonged to human persons. The discovery is stupefying. The unearthed bones reveal proportions that defy understanding. Olmos has each piece measured and documented with meticulous care. The discovered teeth are particularly impressive, 3 fingers wide and 4 in length," he specifies in his report. To give an idea of these dimensions, this represents teeth more than 6 centimeters wide and 8 long, nearly 3 times the size of a normal human molar. But it's not only the dimensions that trouble the conquistadors. It's also the remarkable state of preservation of these bones, as if they had been preserved by some mysterious process. Olmos immediately has several samples shipped to different Peruvian cities so other specialists can examine them. These shipments are documented in colonial administrative records, creating an undeniable historical trace of these extraordinary discoveries. The natives accompanying Olmos's expedition then tell the complete story of these giants, transmitted from generation to generation by their ancestors. According to their account, these colossal beings came by sea on reed rafts fashioned like great boats, men so tall that from the knee down, they were as tall as an ordinary man of fine stature. This description suggests creatures of at least 4 meters in height, dimensions that almost belong to fantasy, if they weren't documented with such precision by official witnesses. The story the natives tell becomes even more extraordinary. These giants, according to oral tradition, weren't peaceful visitors. They terrorized local populations with their brutal strength and depraved customs. They violated women, devoured enormous quantities of food, and spread terror wherever they went. Their appetite was so gargantuan that a single one of them consumed more food than 50 normal men. But the legend doesn't stop there. It tells how divine justice finally struck these creatures. One day, at the height of their exactions, the sky opened and a luminous angel descended from the heavens. This celestial being struck the giants with divine fire that consumed them all instantly, leaving only their bones as testimony to their past existence. This account, though imbued with the marvelous, finds a troubling echo in Olmos's discoveries. The bones indeed present traces that could be interpreted as burns, as if these creatures had perished in a gigantic fire. Even stranger, the skeleton's arrangement suggests simultaneous and brutal death, consistent with the idea of a sudden catastrophe that struck them all at once. Olmos has the most remarkable bones sealed and shipped to Lima, capital of the Peruvian viceroyalty, so superior authorities can examine them. These shipments are duly recorded in colonial administrative archives, creating a chain of documentary evidence spanning centuries. But here the story takes an even more mysterious turn. Several of these shipments never reach their destination, mysteriously disappearing en route. 10 years after Olmos's discoveries, a man would forever mark the history of these mysterious giants. Pedro Cieza de León, born around 1,520 inches, Llerena, Spain, arrives in Peru as a conquistador, but proves above all to be one of the most meticulous chroniclers of his era. Unlike many of his contemporaries who content themselves with reporting hearsay, Cieza de León has the particularity of wanting to see with his own eyes everything he records in his writings. In 1553, when he writes his Chronicle of Peru, Cieza de León decides to personally investigate these giant stories circulating among conquistadors. His approach is remarkably modern for the era. He cross-references testimonies, verifies sources, and above all, goes to sites to examine physical evidence. What he discovers overwhelms him to the point that he devotes several chapters of his work to these extraordinary creatures. In the province of Santa, he writes, "It is told that in ancient times there came by sea, on reed boats fashioned in their manner, men so tall that they had, from the knee down, the height of a man of good stature, and that their limbs were proportioned to their body's greatness, so that it was a monstrous thing to see their heads, with their hair that fell to their shoulders." But Cieza de León doesn't content himself with reporting legends. He pushes his investigation further and claims to have seen with his own eyes the physical proof of these giants' existence. "In this land," he continues, "I have seen water wells made by these giants, carved in living rock, and they are so large and so deep that it's manifest they couldn't have been dug by men of our size." These gigantic hydraulic installations deeply impress the chronicler with their dimensions and remarkable technical craftsmanship. More troubling still, Cieza de León reports having personally examined bones from these creatures. In the year 1550, being in the city of Lima, he writes, "I heard tell that in the time when His Excellence Don Antonio de Mendoza was there, Viceroy and Governor of New Spain, bones of men so large had been found that they could only be from giants. And I myself heard tell that whole giant bones had been found in an ancient tomb in Mexico City and its surroundings." The chronicler doesn't stop at these indirect testimonies. He describes having seen himself, in different regions of Peru, bones of extraordinary size. "I have seen in the city of Cuzco," he specifies, "molar teeth so large and so heavy that several people can testify to it. These teeth, according to his measurements, far exceed everything medicine of the era knows regarding normal human anatomical variations." Cieza de León also brings new light to these giants' fate. According to the traditions he gathers, these creatures didn't disappear at once under divine fire, as some legends tell. They would have rather been progressively exterminated by local populations, disgusted by their brutal behaviors. "The natives of this land," he writes, "allied against them and killed them by force of tricks and ambushes, for they were so strong that they couldn't be vanquished in fair combat. This version of events presents the giants in a more realistic and less marvelous light than accounts of divine intervention. It suggests an extermination war waged by indigenous populations against these extraordinary invaders, a war that ended with the local people's total victory and the complete eradication of the giant race. Cieza de León's work is all the more precious because he systematically cross-references his information with other sources. He notably cites testimonies from Juan de Betanzos, another chronicler of the era, who confirms the existence of gigantic bones in several Peruvian regions. Betanzos, in his own writings, reports that the Incas themselves preserved the memory of these giants and spoke of ancestral battles fought against them. Garcilaso de la Vega, the famous mestizo son of a Spanish conquistador and an Inca princess, also brings his contribution to this extraordinary dossier. In his royal commentaries of the Incas, he confirms that giant accounts weren't considered legends by indigenous peoples, but as real historical events, seriously transmitted from generation to generation. What makes these testimonies particularly credible is their remarkable convergence. Independent chroniclers, writing at different times and in different regions, all report similar descriptions. Same extraordinary heights, same gigantic proportions, same physical traces left by these creatures. This concordance between independent sources constitutes a troubling body of evidence spanning centuries. As the 16th century progresses, testimonies about these mysterious giants continue to accumulate. Agustín de Zárate, a high colonial official who stays in Peru between 1543 and 1544, also discovers extraordinary bones in Tucumán province. His account, published in 1555, brings additional details that corroborate his predecessor's observations. In 1620, Jesuit Father Pablo José de Arriaga, missionary and specialist in indigenous population evangelization, mentions in his manuscript, on the eradication of idolatry in Peru, the existence of these giant bones that continue to trouble minds. His testimony is all the more important as it comes from a churchman, renowned for his rigor and intellectual honesty. But it's toward the end of the 18th century that the most intriguing character in this story intervenes. Hipólito Unanue, Peruvian physician and naturalist considered one of the fathers of modern science in South America. Unanue, trained in the most advanced European scientific methods of his era, undertakes around 1,790. A systematic study of giant bones preserved in various Peruvian institutions. His notes, partially preserved in Lima archives, reveal remarkably methodical work. Unanue measures, weighs, draws, and analyzes these bones with scientific precision that equals modern standards. His conclusions are troubling. These bones indeed present human anatomical characteristics, but on a scale exceeding everything science of the era can explain. Even more extraordinary, Unanue manages to gather enough elements to partially reconstruct several skeletons. His drawings, preserved in the University of San Marcos archives in Lima, show bone structures of perfect anatomical coherence, but of a size defying understanding. The femurs he examines measure more than 60 centimeters in length, compared to 35 to 40 for a modern tall man. Unanue doesn't content himself with studying bones. He also interrogates the last direct witnesses, centenarian natives who claim to have heard detailed accounts about these giants from their grandparents. These oral testimonies bring striking details about these extraordinary creatures' way of life. According to these accounts, the giants didn't form an organized civilization, but rather nomadic bands moving along coasts, living from fishing and pillaging. Unanue's last research paradoxically marks the beginning of these extraordinary proofs' disappearance. For at the very moment when science begins to seriously interest itself in these bones, they begin mysteriously disappearing. The collections Unanue had so carefully constituted progressively diminish, the most remarkable pieces evaporating one by one without leaving traces. This progressive disappearance isn't an accidental phenomenon, Colonial archives reveal that from the early 17th century, Spanish ecclesiastical authorities manifest growing unease faced with discoveries that question the biblical vision of creation. Several royal edicts order the seizure and destruction of bones, contrary to true faith discovered in American colonies. The Inquisition itself takes close interest in these discoveries. Its archives, made public in the 20th century, reveal several procedures opened against chroniclers accused of propagating fables contrary to Holy Scripture by reporting these giants' existence. This institutional pressure partially explains why numerous testimonies of the era adopt a prudent tone and take refuge behind indigenous tradition, rather than directly asserting the reality of these discoveries. Parallel to this official repression, a more discreet but equally effective phenomenon takes place: the systematic reinterpretation of discoveries. Giant bones are progressively reattributed to prehistoric animals, mastodons, giant sloths, or other disappeared megafauna. This explanation, more compatible with nascent scientific knowledge and less disturbing for religious authorities, gradually becomes the official version. Yet, this reinterpretation poses numerous problems. The era's chroniclers explicitly describe skulls, teeth, and long bones of human appearance, not animal bones. Moreover, certain drawings preserved in archives clearly show bipedal anatomical structures, incompatible with known South American megafauna. At the beginning of the 19th century, with South American independence wars, numerous colonial archives are destroyed or dispersed. The bone collections, already decimated by official repression, suffer new, irreparable losses. When professional archaeologists first arrive in South America in the second half of the 19th century, they find only scattered fragments and indirect testimonies of these extraordinary discoveries. Today, more than 5 centuries after Magellan's and Olmos's first discoveries, the South American giant's mystery remains intact. Physical proof has disappeared, victim of a combination of negligence, official repression, and historical catastrophes. Only testimonies remain, convergent but now viewed with skepticism by the official scientific community. Yet these testimonies present remarkable coherence, spanning centuries and borders. Independent explorers, official chroniclers, missionaries, scientists, prize, all report similar observations with troubling constancy. Can we really sweep aside so many convergent testimonies? Certain recent discoveries relaunch the debate. Archaeological excavations conducted in Nevada have unearthed human skeletons of unusual size, strangely recalling Spanish chroniclers' descriptions. In Peru itself, sporadic discoveries continue feeding interrogations. Elongated skulls, bones of exceptional dimensions, traces of unexplained technology. Modern science, with its DNA analysis and carbon-14 dating methods, could easily settle the debate. Modern science, if only the proof hadn't so mysteriously disappeared. This disappearance itself raises questions. How can entire bone collections, documented and studied for centuries, evaporate without leaving traces? Perhaps the truth about the Spanish Chronicles giants doesn't reside in a single explanation, but in the convergence of several phenomena. Human populations of great height could have existed, explaining part of the testimonies. Prehistoric megafauna bones could have been misinterpreted by non-specialized observers. Indigenous legends could have amplified upon contact with European imagination. But this rational explanation doesn't suffice to dispel all mysteries. It doesn't explain certain anatomical descriptions' precision, testimonies' coherence across centuries, nor especially the systematic disappearance of physical proof. It also doesn't explain why men like Cieza de León or Unanue, renowned for their scientific rigor, devoted so much effort to studying what they manifestly considered real phenomena and not legends. The Spanish Chronicles giants' mystery reminds us that official history is perhaps not as complete as we believe. It invites us to keep open minds faced with past testimonies, even the most extraordinary For sometimes, the most incredible legends hide truths our era isn't yet ready to accept. While waiting for new discoveries to illuminate this mystery, the Spanish Chronicles giants continue haunting collective imagination, silent witnesses of a past perhaps more extraordinary than we imagine. Their gigantic shadows continue hovering over South American coasts, reminding us that history still keeps many secrets in its deepest folds. So tonight, looking at the stars, think of those courageous chroniclers who dared report the impossible. Think of those mysterious giants whose bones crossed centuries before disappearing in history's meanders. And ask yourself if our modern world, so sure of its certainties, wouldn't have something to learn from these extraordinary testimonies from the past. Good night, and may your dreams take you on the trail of these forgotten giants, in those distant lands where reality and legend still mingle under the America's starry sky. Rest well, and thank you for sharing this hour with me in history's mysteries. Don't forget to subscribe for other nocturnal voyages into the heart of past enigmas, and tell me in the comments which part of this story struck you most.